Hello guys and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about 3 things you'll want to know as a new tank heading into Elder Scrolls Online Elsweyr. On the other hand, you might want to stick around if maybe you're just a little bit inexperienced, as I'll be covering 3 topics that really are the basics of tanking in Elder Scrolls Online. Without further ado, let's get into topic number 1, taunting and aggro maintenance. Irrespective of the MMO you're playing, it should be no surprise that taunting is a key part of any tank's job. In Elder Scrolls Online, there are 3 main ways we can go about ensuring PvE enemies are hitting us as much as possible and avoiding killing our teammates. The first method is single target taunting, and currently there are 2 reliable single target taunts in the game at the moment. The first is Pierce Armor, a sword and board ability which is open to every class, and Inner Fire, an undaunted ability that is similarly open to everybody. Now if you're looking for an unreliable or maybe at least uncommon way of doing a single target taunt, there are 2 other methods. First off, you can invest in the passive in the Destruction Staff skill line, which makes all of your Frost Staff heavy attacks become a taunt, but I wouldn't recommend it. And in addition to that, you can also consider trying out an underutilized set, but probably for a good reason underutilized I might add, which turns all of your charged abilities into a taunt ability as well. Another way to get aggro is to use chain abilities like Silver Leash or Unrelenting Grip. In this clip here I'll show you how I grab a sword and board that was charging at my ally without having to taunt. And as you see there, it will hit me for a little bit and I can apply a single target taunt later. This can be helpful especially if you are slow into taunting an enemy that might be quite dangerous, and if you chain it, it'll actually interrupt any abilities it was doing at the time, which can save your ally's life. It is therefore crucial to have one of these in your bar, as is the most reliable way of stunning and chaining in an enemy. Now there are a couple of other options which sort of work in the same way, but have different mechanics related to them, and that is the Frozen Gate for the Warden and Beckoning Armor for the Necromancer. With the teleportation pad, the Frozen Gate, you place it on the ground, and for Beckoning Armor you just need to be hit by a ranged enemy and it will pull them in. Finishing off topic number 1, there's a final way you can go about getting aggro, and that is by casting an AoE ability like I did just then on screen to have the enemies hit you briefly. They will reapply aggro to different targets as the fight goes on if you don't get aggro onto them properly through a taunt, but it is one way that you can avoid allies getting one-ticked by the initial light attacks of packs that you're going into. A good example of an AoE you can use is Elemental Blockade, which I'm using now. As it's a weapon ability, it also has the added benefit of passively applying my weapon enchant on cooldown, which can be crucial for ensuring good debuff uptime. We'll get more into that in another video. With that said, let's get into topic number 2. Going beyond taunting, crowd control is an excellent way for tanks to handle smaller adds. While larger bosses and elites are immune to crowd control, lots of small adds can be effectively managed by applying things such as stuns, snares, and immobilizations. In Elder Scrolls Online, they classify CC into 3 separate categories. You have hard CC, which is for stuns, fears, and pulls. In addition to that, there is also sort of hardish CC, immobilizations, which is a change in Elsweyr, and then finally soft CC, which includes snares and slows. In ESO, hard CC works quite simply. After you apply a stun and it expires, so say 4 seconds elapses and the enemy is no longer stunned, they'll get this buff here, which is a 7-second immunity buff, meaning you can no longer apply hard CC for the duration of that buff. Once the 7 seconds is over, you can then reapply another form of hard CC. On your screen now are a couple of examples, Fear Before and Power Bash, so it's important to keep in mind the 7 seconds as you don't want to be wasting resources. Prior to Elder Scrolls Online Elsweyr, immobilizations worked really quite differently, and there was no cooldown or immunity associated with them. However, they've decided to change this, and now there's a 3-second immunity window that is applied after the expiration of any immobilization. So, like hard CC, you have to keep in mind that you cannot reapply these abilities within that immunity period. On the other hand though, it's only a 3-second window instead of a 7-second window you have to wait out. To finish off this topic, let's talk about how soft CC works. This form of CC slows enemies and has no immunity period associated with it, so feel free to spam it as much as your resources allow. As a final note, it's also important to talk about how CC interacts with each other. If you hard CC an enemy and they have a 7-second immunity buff, you can still immobilize them with hardish CC, and that'll apply effectively. This means that you can use all 3 different forms at the same time, and if you layer them properly, you'll be able to control your adds really well. So, with all of that talked about, it's time to move on to our third and final topic, resource maintenance, or as I like to call it, knowing when to block. In this final topic, I want to talk about a few general rules that can guide your taunting, can guide your blocking, and also your resource maintenance in most content in the game. While they won't apply to everything, particularly the newer DLC dungeons and trials, it can help save your life and also make sure your resource bar is remaining relatively high. So, when it comes to blocking, there's a few different ideas that you have to incorporate to do it effectively. When you're fighting multiple enemies at once, non-boss mobs in particular, you only really want to block heavy attacks and any spells that might be cast. Heavy attacks are indicated by a little sparkly charge up AoE around the enemy that's casting it, and with spells you'll see a red interruptible AoE most of the time, indicating a spell that can be cast, and this can be interrupted. When it comes to bosses, there is a similar idea at play. Basically, you want to be blocking or moving out of any spells they cast, and absolutely blocking their heavy attacks. I do want to mention, however, that in newer content, occasionally you'll be required to roll dodge, such as in Moonhunter Keep, as the heavy attack itself will do way too much damage to you, and can actually kill you even if you have block up and full resistances. Ultimately, it will be up to you to figure out when is best to block and when to not, but outside of these windows of heavy attacks and spells, you should be okay to drop block and allow your resources to be restored. This is particularly relevant when you're fighting multiple enemies at once, as if you're overblocking, quickly your stamina pull or your magicka pull, depending on if you're using a sword and board or an ice staff, will quickly drop to zero. The final aspect I want to cover now relates to taunt priority and resource maintenance specifically. So with taunt priority, when you're looking at a large ad pull, what do you taunt first? Well, the general rule is to look for any two-handers or sword and board melee ads and try and get a single target taunt on them first, as naturally you're not able to get aggro on everything, even if you'd like to. After that, try and get taunt on any remaining melee ads, and then start to focus on the ranged ads. In most content, typically range ads don't hit as hard as melee, and they can only really do light attacks, which will always be less than a heavy. They do have dangerous spells, but these can be moved out of and can also be interrupted if they do target a single target. When it comes to how often you should be pressing your abilities, with taunt you want to try to aim to get about 60 to 70% of the pack taunted at least. That's because often you spend extra time stacking all the ads up and ensuring the DPS can AoE them down effectively. That way, if you're spending a little bit less time on taunting, you can ensure that the low priority taunt targets are stacked nicely, rather than taunting even the low priority, which in some ways is a little bit a waste of time. When it comes to the remainder of your abilities, look to use these somewhat sparingly, and by sparingly I mean you want to have them last to full duration. For tanking, it's really important to have at least a 30 or 40% remaining bar in stamina or magicka, so that you have enough time to react to whatever might happen, as things can often change, and if an ally goes down, suddenly you might be without heals, or without enough damage to clear a particular mechanic. Ultimately, good resource maintenance as a tank means you have enough resources left over to heal yourselves in emergencies and to recover the group if there is a bit of a tragedy that occurs. Other than that though, I think this is really the best general outlook on taunting and resource maintenance, and if you want to know more you have to really get specific and look at particular examples, and of course I'll be covering that in further videos. Well, that about wraps it up for today, and for the one person that stayed around, thank you. Now I have one more thing, and no, I know what you're thinking. It's not like and subscribe, and it's not please donate to my PayPal. Actually, what I want to talk to you about now is my Discord channel and my guild on the NA PC mega server. If you are interested in having a place to hang out, clear some content, and just ask some questions, please let me know and send an in-game email to me at Loterk. That's my handle. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and please let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in further content like this again, or whether you'd like to see something a little bit differently. Until next time guys, take care and bye for now.